Madison had always been drawn to the quiet, the stillness, the kind of silence that wrapped around you like a heavy blanket. It wasn't just that she loved the darkness, it was that she felt at home in it. The way the shadows stretched and twisted, the way the world seemed to hold its breath when the sun dipped below the horizon. It was her sanctuary. But tonight, the darkness felt different. It felt alive, watching, waiting. It had been one of those days. Madison had woken up late, her alarm blaring at her like an angry parent. She'd hit snooze once, twice, 3 times until the morning had slipped away from her. She'd planned to go for her usual morning jog, the one that always left her muscles aching and her mind clear. But the weight of her blankets had been too comforting, the pull of sleep too strong. By the time she'd dragged herself out of bed, the sun was high in the sky, and the thought of jogging in the heat made her groan. "I'll go later," she'd told herself, though later never came. Now, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she cursed her laziness. Her body wasn't tired, her mind wasn't calm, and sleep was a distant dream. She'd tried everything, counting sheep, deep breathing, even that ridiculous meditation app her friend had recommended. But nothing worked. The clock on her nightstand blinked 2:47 a.m., and frustration bubbled up inside her like a pot about to boil over. She kicked off the covers and sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. If she couldn't sleep, she might as well do something productive, or at least something that would tire her out. The decision to go for a jog at this ungodly hour wasn't one she made lightly. The woods behind her house were dark and quiet, the kind of place that most people avoided after sunset. But Madison wasn't most people. She loved the trail that wound through the trees, the way the moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows on the ground. It was peaceful, or at least it usually was. She pulled on her jogging clothes, a pair of black leggings, a hoodie, and her worn-out sneakers, and grabbed her phone and earbuds. The house was silent as she crept downstairs, the floorboards creaking under her weight. She paused at the front door, her hand hovering over the lock. Something felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath, but she shook the feeling off. It was just her imagination, she told herself, just the lack of sleep playing tricks on her. The night air was cool against her skin as she stepped outside, the faint scent of pine and damp earth filling her nostrils. She popped in her earbuds and started her jog, the rhythmic thud of her footsteps against the dirt path calming her nerves. The woods were darker than usual, the moon hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. But Madison didn't mind. She liked the darkness. It made her feel invisible, like she was the only person in the world. At first, everything was normal. The sound of her breathing, the crunch of leaves under her feet, the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. But then something changed. It was subtle at first, a rustling in the bushes, a snap of a twig. Madison slowed her pace, her heart skipping a beat. She pulled out one earbud and listened, her eyes scanning the trees. The sound stopped. She told herself it was just an animal, a deer or a raccoon, but the unease in her chest didn't go away. She started jogging again, faster this time, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The rustling started again, louder this time, like something or someone was keeping pace with her. She glanced over her shoulder, but the path behind her was empty. The sound was coming from the trees, from the shadows. She stopped dead in her tracks, her heart pounding in her ears. The rustling stopped too. The woods were silent, too silent, like the world was holding its breath. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer, just the sound of her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. She told herself it was nothing, just her mind playing tricks on her. but the fear was real, a cold, heavy weight in her chest. She turned and started running, her feet pounding against the dirt path. She didn't stop until she reached her house, her lungs burning, her legs shaking. She slammed the door shut behind her and leaned against it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The house was quiet, the familiar creak of the floorboards comforting. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that there was nothing out there. But the fear lingered, a shadow in the back of her mind. She went upstairs to her room, her legs still trembling. She peeled off her sweaty clothes and stepped into the shower, the hot water washing away the dirt and the fear. By the time she got out, she felt almost normal again. She pulled on a clean pair of pajamas and sat down on her bed, letting out a deep breath. She was tired now, her body finally ready to sleep. She reached for her phone to set an alarm, but before she could, something grabbed her. It happened so fast she didn't have time to scream. Two hands shot out from under the bed, cold and strong, wrapping around her ankles like a vice. She kicked out instinctively, her heart racing, her mind screaming. The hands tightened their grip, pulling her toward the edge of the bed. She kicked again, harder this time, and felt her foot connect with something solid. The hands let go, and she scrambled off the bed, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She didn't stop to think. She ran for the door, her legs moving on their own. She glanced back just once, just long enough to see the man crawling out from under her bed. He was tall and thin, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes dark and empty. He was smiling, a wide, twisted grin that made her stomach churn. She slammed the door shut behind her and ran down the hall, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, just that she had to get away. She stumbled into the spare room and locked the door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the knob. She leaned against the door, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She needed to call for help, but her phone was still in her bedroom. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on the landline phone on the nightstand. She grabbed it and dialed 911, her fingers trembling as she pressed the buttons. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, steady, a lifeline in the chaos. There's someone in my house, Madison whispered, her voice shaking. He was under my bed. He's still here. Please, you have to help me. Okay, I need you to stay calm, the operator said. Can you tell me your address? Madison opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness, the only sound the faint hum of the phone line. Madison's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her back against the door, her eyes scanning the room. The darkness was suffocating, pressing in on her from all sides. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic, like a drum in her ears. And then she saw him. He was outside the window, his face pressed against the glass, his wide, empty eyes staring right at her. He was smiling that same twisted smile, his teeth gleaming in the moonlight. Madison screamed, the sound tearing through the silence. She dropped the phone and backed away from the window, her legs trembling. The man started climbing, his fingers gripping the windowsill, his movements slow and deliberate. Madison didn't think, she just ran. She bolted out of the room and down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. She didn't know where she was going, just that she had to get away. She ran through the kitchen, her hands fumbling for the back door. She yanked it open and stumbled outside, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. She didn't stop running until she reached the woods, the trees closing in around her like a protective shield. She crouched behind a tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear him coming, his footsteps crunching against the leaves. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle the sound of her breathing. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment there was silence. Then she heard his voice, low and guttural, like the growl of an animal. "I know you're here," he said, his voice sending a shiver down her spine. "You can't hide from me." Madison's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She pressed herself against the tree, her eyes squeezed shut. She could hear him moving, his footsteps getting closer. She didn't know what to do. She was trapped, helpless, like a mouse caught in a snake's gaze. And then, just when she thought it was over, she heard a sound. A car engine, loud and unmistakable. The man froze, his head snapping toward the sound. Madison didn't waste a second. She bolted, her legs moving on their own. She didn't look back, didn't stop to think. She just ran, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She didn't stop until she reached the road, her legs giving out beneath her. She collapsed onto the pavement, her body trembling. The car was coming closer, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Madison raised a hand, her vision blurry with tears. The car screeched to a halt, and a man jumped out, his face pale with shock. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Madison couldn't answer. She just nodded, her body shaking uncontrollably. The man helped her into the car, his hands gentle but firm. As they drove away, Madison glanced back at the woods, her heart still racing. She could see him standing at the edge of the trees, his dark eyes watching her, his twisted smile still plastered on his face. She didn't know if she'd ever feel safe again, but for now, she was alive, and that was enough. If you enjoyed Madison's harrowing escape from the shadows that lurked in the darkness, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a spine-chilling tale. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hiding under your bed. They're the ones already inside your home waiting for the lights to go out. Sleep with one eye open because you never know who or what might be watching. Until next time, stay safe if you can.